February 28, 2026. The United States launched one of the most powerful military strikes in modern history. B-2 bombers, F-35s, Tomahawks, the full arsenal, but buried inside that same operation was something nobody expected. A weapon that looked suspiciously familiar. Not American, Iranian. Think about that. The world's most powerful military on its biggest strike in years quietly deployed a weapon modeled after its own enemy. Why would the strongest army on the planet start copying the weapons of a country it was bombing? That's exactly the question we're answering today. This isn't just about drones, it's about who writes the rules of modern war. And whether those rules just got rewritten overnight. Seriously, if the world's strongest military starts copying the weapons of the weak, what does that actually tell you about who's winning? Today's story is about a drone called Lucas, and the Iranian weapon that might just be its father. Let's go back to the beginning. Operation Epic Fury, February 28, 2026. Over 9,000 combat flights, 140 Iranian vessels destroyed, and one drone nobody saw coming. Lucas, low-cost unmanned combat attack system. Notice that name. The US military actually put the words low-cost right in the official title. It's made by SpectreWorks based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Unit cost about $35,000. Less than a luxury SUV. That's the whole point. Compare that to a Tomahawk cruise missile at $1.3 million each. The US still used those too, but now Lucas was flying alongside. In December 2025, CENTCOM made a quiet but historic announcement. The first ever one-way attack drone squadron deployed to the Middle East. Task Force Scorpion Strike. One-way attack drone. Let that phrase actually sink in. You launch it, it flies to the target, detonates on impact, and it never, ever comes back. 2 weeks later, in December 2025, the Navy launched Lucas from a warship at sea for the very first time in history. A milestone slipped past most headlines. Then, February 28, 2026. Lucas entered real combat for the first time. Just 8 months from Pentagon debut to actual battlefield. That's unheard of in US procurement. US weapons normally take years, sometimes decades, to go from concept to combat. 8 months. Why was America moving at startup speed? Because it had to. You can launch Lucas from the ground, from a truck, or from a ship at sea. It uses satellite communications and can reach targets up to 2,000 kilometers away. It has what the military calls an open architecture. Different payloads, different communication systems, and the government owns the design so any manufacturer can build it. Here's a question. If you have billion-dollar stealth bombers and fighter jets, why do you also need a $35,000 disposable drone? Think about it. That answer changes everything we think about how wars are fought today. And to understand it, we first need to meet the weapon that Lucas was modeled after. Iran, a country under US sanctions for decades. No stealth fighters, no aircraft carriers, no homegrown precision cruise missiles. Not the obvious candidate to reshape modern warfare, and yet Iran managed to help rewrite the rules of modern warfare. Not with expensive technology, with something almost embarrassingly cheap and simple, the Shahed 136, a one-way attack drone costing between $20,000 and $50,000. Slow, noisy, and it completely changed the strategic calculus of modern conflict. The Shahed looks like a flying lawnmower engine with wings. That unmistakable buzzing sound became the sound of fear across Ukraine, the Middle East, everywhere. Starting in 2022, Iran supplied hundreds, then thousands of Shaheds to Russia. Russia used them to batter Ukrainian cities, power stations, and civilian infrastructure night after night. Ukraine shot down many of them, but here's the cruel math. One Shahed costs about $50,000. One Patriot interceptor missile costs $4 million. Iran fires one drone. You shoot it down with a Patriot missile. You just spent $4 million to stop a $50,000 weapon. Do that 1,000 times. That cost imbalance on attacking cheap, defending expensive, is the true genius of what Shahed introduced. It's not just a weapon, it's a financial strategy wrapped in wings. Iran didn't stop there. They shared this technology with the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, armed groups across Iraq and Syria. Suddenly, everyone had reach, In under 3 years, Iran's drone playbook spread to at least 6 armed groups across the Middle East and beyond. The weapon of the powerless had gone global. Think about what that means. Before Shahed, if you couldn't afford a real air force, you simply couldn't strike targets 500 miles away. That changed overnight. The Shahed isn't just a drone. It's essentially a cruise missile that anyone can afford. That's what made it genuinely, historically revolutionary for modern warfare. U.S. Navy ships in the Red Sea fired over $1 billion in missiles between 2023 and 2025, just to defend against Houthi drones built on this same playbook. The Pentagon's own chief weapons buyer said it out loud in 2024. If we're shooting down a $50,000 drone with a $3 million missile, that's not a good cost equation. America had a problem. Shahed had exposed a fundamental flaw in how expensive militaries defend themselves. And someone inside the Pentagon was paying very close attention. Here's the part most people miss. America didn't copy Iran's drone because it was desperate. It copied it because it finally admitted something very hard to admit. The old model, massive air campaigns, weeks of air dominance, expensive precision strikes, works brilliantly against the right opponent. But the world had changed profoundly. For 3 years, the world watched two sides fight, using modern air defenses and cheap attack drones simultaneously. Ukraine was a live classroom for every military on Earth. Drones account for roughly 70% of Russian casualties in Ukraine. Not jets, not tanks. Cheap flying machines launched by the thousands every single day. In 2023, the Pentagon launched something called the Replicator Initiative. Deputy Secretary Hicks spelled it out clearly. America needed platforms that are small, smart, cheap, and many. Small, smart, cheap, and many. That phrase, from America's second highest defense official, is basically describing the Shahed playbook with a Washington accent. Does it surprise you that America openly acknowledged it needed to adopt a strategy pioneered by Iran? Because it honestly surprised quite a few people in Washington, too. In July 2025, Defense Secretary Hegseth issued a directive titled Unleash U.S. Military Drone Dominance and ordered the Pentagon to cut red tape and deploy drones fast. Congress backed it up with a $1 billion drone dominance program, authorized in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act of 2025. Mass-produce cheap attack drones, fast. Lucas was the result. 8 months from Pentagon showcase to real combat deployment. Startup speed. Because the lesson of Ukraine was screaming too loud to ignore, and CENTCOM said it directly. Lucas drones are modeled after the Shahed. Not a leak, not a rumor. An official public statement. That says everything. But the U.S. didn't just copy a weapon. It absorbed a philosophy that flooding the battlefield with cheap, disposable systems fundamentally changes the economics of modern war. At $35,000, Lucas costs roughly 600 times less than an MQ-9 Reaper drone. Disposable versus reusable. Volume versus precision. The strategy shifted. The government even owns the Lucas design outright, meaning multiple manufacturers can build it and produce it in mass volume. The goal is overwhelming numbers. America looked at what Iran built and what Russia deployed in Ukraine and made a clear strategic decision. Not from weakness, from cold, hard strategic clarity. Okay, and so now you know what Lucas is and where it came from. But here's the real question. What does this actually change on the battlefield? Think about this from a defender's perspective. Hundreds of cheap drones inbound. Which ones do you intercept with million-dollar missiles? All of them? That math breaks fast. Each interception means activating radar networks, trained crews, command systems, warships, fuel, and global logistics. All mobilized to stop one $50,000 flying bomb. In just the first week of Operation Epic Fury, Iran launched over 1,000 drones and missiles against Gulf states. Over 1,000 in 7 days. Can you picture that? The UAE alone absorbed over 1,400 drone and missile strikes in just the first 7 days. That's what cheap drone warfare looks like at full operational scale. And here's what makes it so strategically effective. Iran wasn't trying to win purely with drones. It was using them to exhaust, confuse, and drain the defenders. Force your enemy to fire expensive interceptors at cheap drones. Expose their radar positions, drain their missile stockpiles, then strike real targets when defenses are stretched thin. Ukraine found a brilliant answer. cheap interceptor drones costing just $2,000, shooting down $50,000 Shaheds. A 25-to-1 cost advantage for the Defender? There's a Ukrainian company called Wild Hornets. Their Sting interceptor has downed over 3,000 Russian Shaheds since June 2025 alone. Gulf states now want them too. The point is this: drones are no longer supplementary weapons. In modern warfare, they've become the backbone, the primary instrument that sets the tempo of the entire fight. When America deployed Lucas alongside its B-2 bombers and F-35s, it wasn't abandoning expensive jets. It was saying cheap drones and premium aircraft work best together. Here's a question worth sitting with. Does an army with 10,000 cheap drones scare you more than one with 50 expensive jets? That's now a serious debate. The answer is probably both. And that's exactly the point. The future isn't cheap drones replacing everything. It's cheap drones making everything else far more lethal. Now here's where the story gets philosophically interesting. All of this Lucas Shahed drone saturation is forcing the world's most powerful Air Force to rethink everything. General David Alvin, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force, said something remarkable in 2024. Something that would have been unthinkable for a military leader a decade ago. He said maintaining air superiority for days and weeks on end, the way America used to, like in the Gulf War, is now simply too expensive and unnecessary. Let that actually land. The Chief of the U.S. Air Force is saying the era of owning the sky continuously, indefinitely, like America once did, may be over. In Desert Storm 1991, America spent weeks systematically destroying Iraqi air defenses before a single ground soldier advanced. Owning the sky was the foundation of everything else. Today, air defenses are mobile, networked, and hidden across vast areas. Drones are everywhere. Neither side fully owns the sky, and that's now called a mutually denied environment. So Alvin is proposing a fundamental shift. Stop thinking about permanent air dominance and start thinking in windows, brief moments of controlled airspace, opened and closed as needed. Here's what that looks like in practice. Cheap drones overwhelm sensors and exhaust defenses first. In the window that creates, your stealth jets hit the high-value targets. The drones are the key turners. The jets are the people who walk through the open door. Neither works as well without the other anymore. And this isn't just theory. In Operation Epic Fury, that's exactly what happened. Lucas and stealth bombers operating in the same sky, same mission, wildly different price tags. 2 Finnish air defense officers wrote a paper on this recently. Their conclusion: air superiority shouldn't be a permanent assumption. It should be a tool you deploy selectively. Wars used to begin with weeks of air campaigns to clear the sky completely. Now that clearing might happen in hours, using drones. Then the sky closes again. So let's return to the question we started with. Is Lucas the son of Iran's Shahed? Technically and officially, CENTCOM said it. Modeled after. Those were the words. But the deeper answer is more interesting. Lucas isn't just a copy of Shahed. It's America's formal acknowledgement that Shahed's underlying logic was correct all along. Iran, and under sanctions for decades with no stealth jets, no carriers, figured out something that the Pentagon eventually had no choice but to admit was true. Flooding the battlefield with cheap, long-range disposable weapons doesn't just destroy targets. It changes the economics, the math, the entire strategic logic of modern war. Before Shahed, the rich won wars with expensive precision. After Shahed, the rich realized they also needed to flood the field or risk being financially bled dry defending. But here's where it gets genuinely complicated. Lucas may be cheap, but behind it lies satellites, AI targeting software, and global logistics networks that are anything but. The drone itself is the cheap part. Everything that makes the drone actually effective, targeting networks, satellite links, battle management AI, is still staggeringly expensive. What does this mean for the rest of us? It means the old rules about who can project military power, and over how far, have fundamentally and permanently changed. When the world's strongest military copies a weapon from a country it was actively bombing, that's not a footnote in history. That's a confession about what actually works in war. If the strong start copying the weapons of the weak, those weapons were never toys. They were the future. And the future arrived on February 28th, 2026. That's a wrap for today. America's Lucas. Iran's Shahed, one war, two weapons that helped rewrite the same chapter. The sky now belongs to whoever understands the new map.